all of this, if you guys just want to, yeah, if at the end of all of this, if you guys just want to go through the PPT, go through these notes, I think you'll be able to sort of follow the structure that I've laid out today. Yeah. All right, cool. Okay. So I think first step is to understand what is a good vocal recording. How many of y'all record vocals at home here? Can I get a show of hands? How many of y'all record in your bedrooms or in your home studios? All right, super. Amazing. I mean, that's the future now. This is coming from a guy who runs a studio, but yeah, I know that people now record music at home, and you can actually get good sounding recordings at home if you know what to look for, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. So let's talk primarily from the points that we should look for in a good vocal recording. Okay, so the obvious things are, you know, having good equipment and having good resources like a good microphone preamp, a good interface, etc. Apart from all of that, I'm going to talk about things that everybody needs to look out for when they're doing a recording at home. And I'm going to try to do this with the help of a few examples today that might explain to you guys what these different factors are. So let's first look at what some points that I've not mentioned here, but Ajay was actually smart to add a few more points to this list. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a track right now. This is a Green Day track that shout out to Shorik for helping me with recording this. So in this, what I've done is I've shown examples of what these different factors are. Okay, what is proximity? What is a too dynamic of a vocal recording? What is mic overloading? All of these factors, we'll go one by one and understand them. So first step to look for is the most obvious: too much bleed in a recording. Yeah. Do you guys know what bleed means? Have you guys heard the term bleed before? Yeah. Can anybody tell me what bleed means? So bleed is essentially when, if you're wearing headphones like mine, which are open back headphones, or even headphones which are very loose, the sound that leaks out from your monitoring equipment into the microphone is what we usually call as a signal that's bleeding into the microphone. I don't know why it's called that, but it's called a bleed. So anyway, so a bleed is something that's the easiest thing to understand. It's not super technical, so I thought I'll start off with that point. But a bleed is something that we want to look out for, because if an engineer is working with a source that has a lot of the original track mixed in with it, which is not recorded right, you will not be able to mix it well. So let's listen to this example of too much of a bleed. So I'm going to just play you this track right now. Yeah, so this send is going. All right. Okay, cool.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
On first glance, it seems like the audio is fine, but here, if I solo the vocal track and play it to you, you'll be able to hear the bleed. Check this out.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Were you guys able to hear that sound in the background? The actual track that's playing behind the vocals? Yeah, was everybody able to hear that? Alright, I'm just going to play it again. A little louder. Yeah, for those who are not able to see the screen, I would suggest just joining it on the laptop, because I think everybody else is able to see it. Just a couple of people are not able to see.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser.
Oh, sorry about that. My bad. Okay, there. Now you should be able to hear the vocals.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser.
Yeah, so that signal that we can hear off the track that's playing through the headphones in the microphone is what we call a vocal bleed. So this is the first steps that we want to avoid. So how can we avoid a vocal bleed? Can somebody tell me what's the easiest way to avoid a vocal bleed? Is to have headphones that don't. No, so noise gate is how we would solve the problem, but the way to avoid this is to monitor in such a way that your headphones are not either too loose so that the signal is actually leaking out of the headphones into the mic, and to keep the headphone monitoring level low. So now in this case, what we're actually listening to is just the track that's leaking into the vocal mic. But in certain scenarios, you might even have things like a click track that's bleeding in. So imagine like a constant click that's also there with the vocals. That's something that'll be very hard to get rid of. Yeah? Cool. Understood what bleed is. This is probably like the easiest thing to understand, which is why I thought we'll get that sorted off the bat. Cool. Alright, now let's come to the second point, which is proximity. So as you could probably tell, proximity is what happens when you actually are very close to a mic. So can you guys hear my voice right now? What it sounds like versus what my voice sounds like now. So the closer I am to a microphone, you'll hear that there's more low frequency buildup that's happening. Yeah. And that low frequency buildup that happens is primarily because of the closeness to the microphone. Yeah. So we have to maintain a certain distance from the microphone to be able to get the right sound out of it also. Okay. So NGen, I will come to how to treat all these things later. I'll first talk about these different problems and then we'll come to that. Yeah. Okay. So proximity is what happens when the source is super close to the mic. So let's listen to what an example of a vocal which has too much proximity sounds like. Yeah. I'm just going to play you guys first with the track and then we'll listen to the vocals by itself.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Yeah, now let's just listen to only the vocals.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Yeah. If you notice, this also has a lot of bleed. Yeah, so the low frequency buildup that we are hearing on the vocals is what we call as proximity. So the question is, why don't we want too much proximity? And the reason being is that we want the vocal texture or the vocal tone to sound as natural as possible without any buildups or cuts in the overall frequency response of the vocals as it is. Yeah, makes sense? Because if you have a vocal that's that has too much low frequency or low mid frequency, it's going to be very challenging to take that stuff out later and still make the vocal sound neutral. Does that make sense to everyone, what I'm saying? Yeah? Alright, cool. I hope everybody's understood what proximity is. Let me play you guys a little bit more, play you a little more of what vocals with proximity sound like. So I think that should help you understand this point a little better.
Make sure you do it wise.
Yeah, you hear that body on the voice? That's something by default, if you listen to, you should be able to tell that the vocal has too much proximity. Now, I'm not going to get into the complexities of why proximity happens and why proximity occurs with different microphones. But for now, what we want to understand is that we don't want the vocals to be super close to the mic when recording. This is what usually leads to a vocal sounding boxy. If you guys have heard this phrase before, what boxy means is that there is too much buildup in the low mid frequency range of a source. Yeah. So something that we want to avoid. Great. Clear what proximity is? Let's move on. Cool. Now the second thing that we want to look for is a vocal that is very dynamic in nature. Okay. So what does dynamic mean? Can anybody tell me what dynamic means? Please type it in the chat if you can, if you've heard the word, what dynamic is or what dynamic means. Dynamic is loudness, not necessarily. Yeah, the difference between loud and soft is what dynamics is. Super. Very good. Yes, the range of sounds. Alright, cool. Not pitch. Pratik, it's not pitch. Pitch is a different concept. Dynamics is different. So dynamics is actually correlated to loudness, how loud or soft something gets. Yeah. And as you go higher or lower in pitch also, that also changes loudness. So that's a secondary effect. But dynamics primarily has to do with how loud or soft the sound is. Now you guys tell me, when you listen to music, if let's say you're listening to any track, and if the vocals in that track was super soft and super loud at different points in time, would that be pleasing to listen to? No, right? You ideally want the vocals to be as neutral or as evenly placed or sounding as even as possible, so that it doesn't actually sound disorienting, or it doesn't sound that it's too they're jumping in and out of the track, right? Which is why we look at recording the vocals in such a way that they're not too dynamic. Too dynamic meaning the gap between the highest point and the lowest point is too much. We want the gap to be, there obviously naturally will be a gap by default, because funnily enough, dynamics is also what creates emotion. But we don't want the gap to be so much that it becomes disorienting to listen to. Okay, so let's see this with an example. I'm going to play you guys one section of a vocal that's too dynamic. Yeah, so I'll just play this with the track and you'll be able to understand what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, I heard it all before.
Sorry, I'm just going to play this again.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser to try and slap me down, because I know you're right.
Did you guys hear that? Did everybody hear what that was? What that sounded like? Yeah? Cool. Awesome. Now, the thing about dynamics is that there are two ways to look at dynamics. There's dynamics that can happen through the performance aspect of the artist, so which is every singer has a certain range and dynamics that they work with. So you internally also need to understand how dynamic you need to be as a singer. If you're recording yourself, and if you're recording for somebody else, you need to be able to direct the singer to get the right sort of dynamics out of it. So in this case, if this is what I was hearing, if I was recording for someone, what I would say is that you should listen to yourself, monitor yourself better, so that you can be consistent in terms of your dynamics. Yeah. So how do you control dynamics? Let's say you're recording in front of a mic. You guys have probably seen this happen before. But how do you control your dynamics when you're singing in front of a mic? Can anybody give me answers? How one would control dynamics? Yeah. I mean, that happens in post. I'm saying while recording. Yeah. Maintaining distance. Yeah. While recording. Yeah. So when you're getting loud, you move slightly further away from the mic. And when you're going to get soft, then you move close to the mic. Yeah. And if you've seen professional singers, they don't just use that distance as a technique to manage loudness, but they also manage their internal dynamic range while singing. So for all of these factors, it's very important to be able to monitor yourself well. Yes, so one thing that I see a lot of people making mistakes with is that when you're recording at home, you're not monitoring the stuff that you need to listen. The verse is very empty, but the chorus gets very busy. So if the verse is super empty and there's a lot of stuff that comes in the chorus, we'd end up with a vocal that because you can't hear yourself, because there's so much happening in the chorus, that you'd end up becoming even louder to compensate for that. And that's what leads to inconsistent dynamics in the vocal. Yeah, everybody got this point? So, ideally we want vocals that are more neutral and not too dynamic. Okay? Cool. Super. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is mic overload and clipping. Now, people who play or sing or make rock music probably have experienced this before, or anybody who's a loud singer would have experienced this before, is that when you're singing really loud into a mic, whatever DAW you record in, you'd hit that red light on the input, which you'll actually be able to see here also. Yeah. So the way that most of our modern digital recording systems work is that they have a certain range between which they can record signals, and we can't cross a certain threshold because of how digital systems are set up. Again, this stuff is outside the complexity of today's discussion, but in simple words, what it means is that if you end up recording signals too hot in your DAWs through your interfaces, you would end up losing a lot of information, and that loss of information presents itself in the form of clipping. Okay, so let's look at, if I zoom in on the waveform here, you can actually see a bit of it. Let's see if we can. Yeah, this is where the clipping is super evident. Yeah, you guys see this bit where the waveform is completely cut off? Yeah, that's because that signal is getting clipped there. So whatever signal's crossing that threshold is being completely lost. And the reason why it sounds what we usually call as distortion, or we say that the signal sounds distorted, is because you see what a natural waveform looks like here. You see these curves in the waveform. When this curve is completely gone and it becomes flat line, that's what ends up sounding like a distorted signal. Yeah. So because we pushed the signal too much on the way in while recording it, we ended up taking a lot of information off of the signal, or rather all the stuff that was crossing this threshold is completely gone, and that's what ends up sounding like a signal that's clipped. Yeah, should we listen to this and see what it sounds like? Cool.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser to try and slide me down, because I know you're right. So go do what you like. Make sure you do it wise.
Yeah, did you guys hear that? It was super evident.
Make sure you do it.
Yeah, at this point it's...
Make sure you do it wise.
Yeah. So this is something we want to avoid. And how do we end up avoiding this? Is by setting the right amount of gain and monitoring this right amount of gain that we set up on the mic. Yeah? Does everybody know how to do that? Or do you want me to explain how to set up the right gain on the vocals? Or does everybody know? Okay, cool. Alright. Okay, sure. Hi Brigu, how's it going? Yeah, cool. So, the best way to set the gain right on your vocals is to first identify what the loudest part of your song is. Yeah, so the way I would do it is identify what the loudest part of the song is and set that up in front of the mic, set the vocalist in front of the microphone and get them to sing at their loudest. Yeah, and when that's happening, I would set the input of the preamp in such a way that I'm now, again, all meters on different DAWs are different, but it should be somewhere, the number that you should be aiming for is -10 on this meter. Yeah, and how do you read that? Just give me 1 second. Let me just try to show you guys how to read that. Hold on, I'll have to share another screen. Okay. Can you guys see this meter here? It says 0 on the top. So I should be aiming somewhere between -10 to -6. At the loudest, I don't want it to go above 3 for sure. This is the max that it should reach. I would say -6 is also fine. Given that we're recording with good interfaces, we shouldn't be getting too much floor noise. But that's the number you should be aiming at. Yeah? Cool. So this range is what we should be looking at. Peak. This is the peak value that we should be looking at. And most of your, I'll repeat that again. The way that you're setting your gain when you're recording vocals is that take the loudest part of the song and increase the level of your mic preamp in such a way that and do a few runs of that section of the song maybe with the track. And while you're doing that, set the level in such a way that we're recording the peak of the vocals lies between this -6 to -3 range. Yeah, it usually will be represented by an orange color, but we want to make sure that we have enough space above this -3. So it shouldn't, no matter what you do, it shouldn't ideally go above -3. Yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can go above -3, but for most people here, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Yeah, cool. What about if you're recording vocals first? That's fine. All you need to ensure is that your signal is not crossing a certain threshold. As long as it's not reaching 0, you should be fine. Ideally, I would say that it should be between this range on your DAW. Cool. Everybody got that? Okay. Cool. Now let's go on to the fourth point, which is tone change. All right. Tone change is when we have the sound of the vocals changing drastically between takes or between parts of a song. Yeah. So you want the tone to be as consistent and as even as possible. Okay. So I'm going to play you an example of what a vocal that has a lot of tone change in it sounds like. So if you notice, even when I'm talking to the mic right now, if I move away from the mic, the tone or the texture of my voice completely changes. So sometimes when we end up recording vocals or when we're singing and when we're super when you're in the zone and you end up moving a lot, you would end up noticing that the tone of the vocals changes a lot. There's a bunch of ways that you can get around it, but ideally we want the tone to be as consistent as possible. Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to play you guys this section so you can hear what happens and how much the tone difference is apparent when we're recording. Yeah, cool.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to solo only the vocal for now and play you guys.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
I don't know if you guys can hear the difference in tone between just these two lines. Yeah, the first two lines. This sounds a lot duller and this sounds a lot brighter. This is more apparent in this case because it's recorded with a condenser microphone, where condenser microphones are even more susceptible to tone changes. A dynamic microphone, on the other hand, is not as hard to figure, but especially with a condenser microphone, you have to be even more careful if you've set the polar pattern to something like a cardioid. Yes, Anuj, the tone change will also happen if you record over the course of a few days, because forget course of a few days. There are many times when we end up recording vocals and vocals is an instrument that gets tired. So the more you end up singing, the more your texture changes. In fact, usually what I have seen is that recording more than 2 to 3 hours is just like the tone will change so drastically over that time period that it just doesn't make sense to push your vocals beyond that point. Again, I think it's different vocalists with different techniques, with different skill sets, have different abilities, but usually that's the general thing that I've seen, at least in the studio with the musicians that we've recorded. So forget days. I would say in the same day also, if you end up recording in the morning and evening, your tone will be different. That's a completely different thing because of how your, how your, how the voice cords or vocal cords are placed at different points of the day. In fact, if you wake up in the morning, you might notice that your voice sounds different, right? So that's a different thing altogether. So I would recommend doing takes ideally if you can on the same day, and you can also do them over different days, but then make sure that you match your tone when you're recording the song, because you don't want one half of the song to sound completely different from the second half, unless that's something that you're going for, which I mean, then that's something that you're experimenting with, so that's cool. Okay, cool. Tone change is sorted. Any other stuff that I want to show you guys? All right. Noise is super obvious. I'm sure that's the first thing that you guys look out for when recording at home. I think we recorded some AC noise with our vocals. Let me show you guys what that sounds like. But
Well, I heard it all before.
yeah, that's the AC noise. So you also want to look out for noise. Speaking of noise, if you're recording at home, just to get a sense of it, how many of you guys use condenser microphones to record at home? Okay. Radhika, Nif, all right. Okay, cool. So you know what? I'm going to spend maybe the next 5-10 minutes. I didn't plan to talk too much about this, but I'll spend the next 5 to 10 minutes talking about how you can get a good sounding recording at home. Yeah, I'll give you a few tips, because the first studio that I set up also was essentially a bedroom studio. So I've been through this setup and I picked up a few tricks along the way that I can tell you guys. So, alright, so first of all, if you have a condenser microphone, you have to be super careful of how the room sounds in itself to get the right sound out of it. If you have a dynamic microphone, not much to worry about, but in simple words, a dynamic microphone is not as sensitive as a condenser microphone, but also does not sound as crisp. And again, I'm not sure if you guys understand. And again, I don't like using terms like crisp, but basically it doesn't capture as much high frequency information, yeah, as a condenser mic does. So a dynamic microphone usually starts losing information around the 7-8 kilohertz range, and a condenser microphone is very good at picking up high frequency information. Also, a condenser microphone will pick up more of the reflections and the other noises around in your room. So what does reflection mean? Let's take the example of the room that we're sitting in right now. If you see this cloth here, this cloth above me, and this behind all of this cloth, there's something called as insulation material that's sitting, which is what we call glass wool. So this material is what stops sound from reflecting back. So the more flat and even surfaces there are in your room, the more there's going to be reflection of sound, and the more reverb you'll hear in the sound. Yeah. So what you want to do is find a spot in your room where there's not too much flat surface, which usually for a lot of people could be something like the closet where there's a lot of clothes. So you can open the closet if it's your bedroom and keep your back to the closet and record this way. So let's say if this is my condenser microphone, my closet would be behind me and I would record this way. Yeah. You can also try recording into the closet if you can close that, but that might end up making it sound too boxy. But what you want is to not have too many reflections in your room. So if you have like a bed, if you have like a sofa or a few other surfaces in your room that can take off the reflections, great. If you can afford to get a few acoustic panels and put them up in your room, which are the places which are reflective surfaces, like you ideally want to avoid things like mirrors and glass, too much glass in a room. If you have too much of that in a room, then it's not a great room to record in. Even things like curtains, etc. should take off all of that stuff. Yeah. So the best way to do that is to stand at that spot and clap in the room, and you should not be getting too much of a sustain on your clap. If you have like a tight sounding clap, then that's the spot to record in the room. Does that make sense to everyone, what I've said so far? Yeah? Cool. Okay. Alright. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to read through all your pointers so I can address everybody's questions. Should I use Waves NS1 for noise? I'll give you guys a few tools that you can use for easy noise removal. Way better than Waves NS1. Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far? If I've missed out anybody's questions, because there's a lot of things coming in the chat that I've missed out. CPU fan. How do you avoid CPU fan? I would say keep the mic as far as you can from the CPU fan. And honestly, if you can turn down the RPM on your CPU fan, do that, because that will be the best way to reduce the noise. Alright. Okay. Alright, cool. Just give me 2 minutes. I'm just going to go through all the questions here, and then I think we'll be done with the first part of the workshop, where we'll talk about what a good sounding vocal recording is. I'll take questions and then we'll go into the second part of the workshop. Yeah. Okay. What was the second question? Use of a filter in front of a mic. So there are two kinds of filters. There is something called as a ISO box around the vocals. Let me see if I can open that up. Show you guys. That helps a little. This is what an ISO box looks like. But this does exactly what it says it does. It will make your vocals sound boxy though. So that's one downside. So the other filter that we use in front of a mic is what we call a pop filter, and we use that to remove plosives or per sounds. So actually this thing that I have put on the mic right now is doing exactly that. Oops, sorry guys if this is loud. So if I say per, you can hear that there's a low frequency sound that comes with it. That's what a plosive is. So this stuff actually blocks the air directly from hitting the diaphragm of the microphone, which causes the plosives. So just give me a second. Yeah. Okay. How to place acoustic panels correctly. All right. 1 second. Hi, Amini. Oh, I didn't see you. You joined the workshop. Great. How do we reduce sibilance in certain lyrics post-recording without losing emotional impact of the vocals? Yeah, that's where we use something called as a de-esser. I'll show you guys how to use that. It's actually fairly simple to do. And there's a few other easy tricks that you can apply while recording also to remove the extra sibilant sounds, is to be slightly off axis from the microphone. So if you're using a condenser microphone, instead of being straight on the mic, I would just be like a few degrees off from the mic. That itself should take off a bunch of sibilances if you are facing that. And the best way to fix them in post is to use something like a de-esser. Okay, how to manage engineer and singer in the same room? I think both of y'all can use headphones to monitor, obviously, because if you use speakers, you're going to end up getting a lot of bleed. And the other thing I would do is monitor headphones a little quieter so that there's not too much bleed. And then obviously while the engineer is recording, you have to be super quiet because you can't end up making too much noise, otherwise the mic will end up capturing it. Yeah, but it can totally be done. I recorded like this for like the first 5-6 years. This is pretty much how I recorded all of my stuff. So all right, let me just quickly go through other stuff. Okay, so you hear your vocals very low in comparison to the track. That's because your headphone mix is not set up right. In that case, what you can do is, in the second half of this workshop, I'll talk to you about a tool that's called a compressor, and I'll show you a simple compressor that you can use. And just setting the right levels on a compressor will give you the right set of level to monitor yourself. Because what happens is, you probably set the level of your vocals at a part of a song where you're singing soft, So because you're too dynamic, you can't hear yourself consistently. So if you use a little bit of compression on the way in while recording, that should solve that problem. Okay, please tell us about the audio setting before recording and to avoid latency. Okay, cool. Latency, if you guys are using any modern computers to record, you should technically not be getting too much latency. So latency is what happens when the signal is being captured from the microphone and being turned into that audio file that's being stored on your DAW. So the best way to reduce latency is by reducing the buffer size on your DAW. So it'll be in the same settings tab. Can you guys see this tab here? I'm not sure. What else? Probably. Yeah. So you see this buffer size? The lower you keep this buffer size, the lesser the latency will be. Yeah, and that's all you need to care about. The moment you start going above 512 is when you'll start hearing latency. Okay, cool. Yes. Venkatesh, that's a different question, but you should be able to drive a 250 ohm easily through this. Any other questions that I've missed out? We have another 5 minutes on this. My room size is 13 by 11, close to a square cube. How do I tame frequency build up? That's acoustics. You missed acoustics class, Shashank. You can join in this year's batch. I'll teach you everything in detail there. Yeah, I'll talk to you about what a de-esser is. Okay, what would be an ideal distance from the mic to maintain while singing? I would say 5 to 6 inches. This distance is what should be ideal. Yeah, just use this as a general measure of about like 4 5 finger distance from the mic. Is 6 inches is good enough. Between 5 to 6 inches is a good starting point. And again, it varies from the kind of stuff that you want to record. The best way to really see, the thing is that when you're recording softer stuff, like say if you're recording something that's super intimate, in that case you can use proximity to your advantage to make your vocals sound more intimate. Yeah, so it's not like whatever stuff I'm telling you here, it can be used in either way. It's up to you how you want to utilize that. So when I'm saying that, you should keep it at 6 inches from the microphone, don't always use that as a thumb rule, because there are many scenarios, and with everything that we do in audio, there's no like one specific way to do things. So if you want your vocals to sound super intimate and close, I would be very close to the mic and record. Yeah, alright, cool. Because there I'll be using proximity to my advantage. Okay, how can we get a crisper sound when using a dynamic mic? So the thing is, if I could quickly show you guys, I think this will make things clearer. Yeah, so if you look at a microphone like an SM58, which is like the go-to mic for. So most of the sibilant stuff that we hear is in this range, this 10 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz range. Yeah. So this mic by definition or by its design in itself is not built to capture this frequency. So the way we can actually fix this is by doing it in post, or by using a mic preamp that can exaggerate the higher frequency range. So one example that I can give you for this is, let's say if you use an interface like, now this is just an example, doesn't mean that you have to use this interface, but this interface has something called as this 4K switch, which is essentially like a high frequency EQ boost. So it's countering the frequency response of the microphone. And you can always, EQ your mic or your vocals after it's recorded to bring out that high frequency information out of it. But if you really want stuff sounding great from the get-go, then let's say using a dynamic mic like this, which, as you can see, extends further beyond, like here is where it starts dripping off, and not as, this is a more accurate representation, I think. Yeah. This is the RE20 and this is the... Okay. The RE20 is a way brighter microphone, as you can see. So this mic will end up picking more high frequencies by definition. Can this be done with an Audient ID4? No, I don't think that has a switch for that, but you can always do that using something like an EQ in post. So I'll tell you a few plugins that you can use to bring up that high frequency information. All right. Okay, cool. Let me just check if there are any other questions. Suggest best vocal noise remover. Okay, I will tell you the best way to remove noises. This, I mean, if you don't have a plugin and you don't want to get a plugin, just use this tool. It's ridiculously good at picking up and removing background noise. And it's free, so you can just record your vocals, throw it into this, and just download it. And this is the easiest way to do it. If you know what you're doing, you can use a lot of noise removal tools like RX and Waves, denoise, etc. But this is the easiest way to do it. Yeah, and this says podcast, but you can use this for even... I've suggested people who are doing this for recordings at home which have a lot of noise that can use this as well. In fact, you can also, if you have a bad recording, I am yet to test this, but you can also improve the quality of recording with this. And I'm guessing these tools will get better with time. So I'll send you links of all of this stuff to check on later after this workshop is done. I have compiled these links in a place and kept. Cool. All right. Okay. Okay, super. Now let's go on to the second part of the work. Actually, there's one more section that I wanted to talk about, which is performance-based factors that we need to look for in a good vocal, which is to make sure that the vocals in pitch is dynamically consistent and has consistent texture. I think we discussed these points earlier. Pitch is the only one that we haven't spoken about, but ensuring that the pitch of the vocal is in the right key, that you have the right performance, that's important to look for as well. Yeah, so we have, again, let's just quickly go through these points. What makes a good vocal recording? Stuff that has consistent texture, is dynamically consistent, and has the right gain staging. And the stuff that affects all of these factors is too much proximity affects the tone, too many room reflections affect both the tone and the dynamics of it. Mic overloading will again affect the gain staging of the signal. Performance is again tone and texture, and quality of equipment is what will change the tone and the dynamics of a signal. Yeah, cool. So now we come to the second part of this, which is where we'll be getting into slightly more complex topics. So if it gets too difficult to understand at any point in time, just stop me, guys, yeah? Because I tend to go too much into detail with some of these things, and I don't want to bore you guys either. So just let me know if stuff gets too difficult to understand. All right. So how many of y'all have heard these three things before? What an EQ is, what a compressor is, and what a reverb is. Yeah? Everybody, I'm sure, knows what an EQ is for sure, right? I mean, you've played with it in a car, so you know what it does. All right, cool. So, yeah, I think before we get into understanding what an EQ is, I think we should spend time to first understand how to hear different frequencies. Yeah. So what do I mean by frequency? Let me just quickly go over all of this stuff so that we're on the same page. Every sound that we hear, or the human ear is capable of hearing sounds between 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Yeah. And essentially these are just different pitches. So our ear can hear different levels and it can hear different pitches. So just to show you guys what 20 hertz, or what I mean by the word 20 hertz is, let me just quickly open this up. Yeah, this is what a sine wave of 1 kilohertz sounds like. Can you guys hear this frequency? This is 92 hertz. If I was to ask you the pitch of this versus which pitch is higher, 900 hertz is higher than 90 hertz. Eh? So that's how our ear hears different pitches. And then we have high frequencies. At this point it sounds like a mosquito now, so I'm just gonna switch this off. Yeah, cool. So what's happening is that our ears are capable of hearing different frequency ranges, and what we want to understand, or what we want to do with an EQ, is to control these different frequency ranges so we get the sound and the tone that we're looking for. So first, in order to be able to use an EQ, we need to be able to hear what these different frequencies are. So what I'm going to try to do, and which I try to show through all examples, is by first trying to understand these different frequency ranges. So just to show you what different frequencies are, let's open up an EQ, and you guys can see this plugin that I've opened here. This is an EQ plugin. Yeah, and I am going to... So you see this 20 here and 20K here. These are the different frequencies that we're manipulating with this plugin or with this tool. A plugin is essentially a tool that we use within a DAW to change or shape sounds. Any questions so far? Oh, alright, cool. Okay. Just give me 1 second. Rishi, Borges, are you guys on this link? Can one of y'all connect the camera, the charger to the camera? I think it's running out of battery. I just got a message. Alright, thank you. Okay, cool. So we have frequency ranges from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So let's first try to understand what these different frequencies mean. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play some white noise. Again, there are so many things that I'm bringing up here, but in simple terms, what white noise is it's a bunch of frequencies being played together. Yeah, so it's a good proxy for a vocal or a good proxy for any other source. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost a frequency in different points. Okay, so I'll boost the frequency at 250 hertz. I'll boost the frequency at 500 hertz. I'll boost the frequency at 1 kilohertz, at 2 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, and 8 kilohertz. So that way, what I want you guys to understand is what are these different frequencies and what do they actually sound like when we boost them on a vocal or any other source. So let's just quickly open up white noise. Okay. Was that white noise audible to everyone? Yeah. So okay. So what I'm doing now is I'm only boosting 250 hertz on that noise. Okay. So when I do that, you'll hear almost like there's a vowel being spoken. Yeah. Can anybody tell me what you hear when I boost this? I'm just going to play the noise with the EQ and without the EQ. Yeah. Does it sound like oo? Like oo as in food? Can everybody hear that? Yeah? So the best way to understand this frequency is, let's say if we have too much of that oo sound on a vocal, that means that we have too much of 250 hertz on that vocal. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah, so if I'm super close to a mic, you'll hear more of that frequency range on the vocal. So if you want to take out that ooh or that resonant sound from the vocal, that's the frequency you want to cut. Yeah, bassy voice. That's right. That's right. This might be a little weird to understand, but what I've noticed is that a lot of times people end up applying EQ without really understanding what they're trying to cut out of the signal. So my attempt here with doing all of this is to make you guys understand what 250 hertz sounds like, or rather what these different frequency ranges sound like, so you can actually practically apply them on a vocal. So you know what, for example, what I'm going to do is I am just going to play this on this vocal so we can hear that ooh in action on this vocal also. So you'll hear what I'm saying.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Okay, wait, let me just take out this.
Well, I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need. I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser.
Did you guys hear the difference with the EQ on and off? Yeah? Now this is super exaggerated obviously right now, but the point that I'm trying to make through all of this is that when we're working with different signals, we want to understand what to cut out of that, and that's what an EQ lets us do. So I'm just going to quickly walk through different frequency ranges so you know what I'm talking about here. Just give me a second. So 250 hertz is ooh, 500 hertz is this is more like an O. Yeah, so if you're hearing too much of that sound on a vocal, that usually means that there's too much 500 hertz on the vocal. I'm just going to play this again. And if you guys can't hear it, that's fine also. That probably means that you're not listening on a device that's on which you can monitor clearly, and also that you probably might need to train your ears to hear these things also. Cool. So 500 hertz sounds more like an O, as in like no. Then 1 kilohertz is, this is where things get interesting. So this sounds like ah, AH, right? Like aha. I'll play that again. So in fact, let me show what this sounds like on the vocal as well.
I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser.
Sounds super nasal now, right? Yeah, did everybody hear that? I'm just going to play it without this now, so you'll hear what I'm doing. Yeah.
I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me down because I know you.
Yeah, so this frequency range is got more to do with the nasal texture of the vocals. So both the A and the E range, which is the 2 kilohertz range, have to do with the nasal texture of the vocal.
I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me down.
Yeah, so this section is where there was more body on the voice. This section or this frequency range is adding more nasal texture to the voice. Yeah, everybody heard that? Everybody got that right? Cool. Okay, now let's move on higher, which is 4 kilohertz. This is where we hear sibilant stuff. So S's will pop out here more. S's, sibilants meaning higher frequency sound. So when we say words like S, stuff like that, actually we'll hear this on this also.
I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me down because I know you're right.
Yeah, and the same with 8 kilohertz.
I'm a loser and I.
Oh yeah, the S really pops out here. Yeah, on the loser.
I'm a loser.
Yeah, that's because we're increasing the frequency that corresponds to the S's in that sound. Yeah, so you guys understood how to somewhat apply this EQ from a vocal texture point of view. So we have the 250 to 500 hertz, which is more to do with the body and the boxiness of the sound. We have the 1 kilohertz to 3 kilohertz range, which has to do more with the chest and nasal sound of the voice. And then we have the higher frequency, which is 4 kilohertz and above, which has got more to do with the sibilance of the sound. Yeah? Makes sense to everyone? So if you wanted to make the vocal sound bright, which frequency range would you end up boosting? Or you wanted more sibilance on a vocal, which range would you end up boosting? Higher, yeah. 4 kilohertz and higher, yeah? 4 to 8 kilohertz, yes. 8 kilohertz and high also, so beyond 8 kilohertz also we have high frequency range. And if say you had a vocal that sounded super thin, what frequency range would you end up boosting? That would be your between 200 to 500 or whatever. Like it can be lower than 200 also at times. Again, for a male voice, this all depends on what the pitch of your song is, what the texture of a song is. Like a vocal like Mark Knopfler's will be way lesser than, is even as low as 100 hertz maybe. Yeah. Whereas a female vocal that's being sung in a higher register would be higher. So again, just to give you guys context of what frequencies stand for. This is a super simplified version of what an EQ does, just by the way. But I thought I wanted to keep it as simple as possible for today, and I don't want to get into too many complex topics because I can probably talk about EQs for like 4 hours. So I'm gonna try to keep that as simple as possible. I hope everybody's got that point. Also, another interesting way to understand EQ is with, the keyboard or like the keys of a piano. The left hand side is the lower register, so you can actually correspond different frequencies to different pitches also. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Cool. Okay. What an EQ does, is that somewhat clear to everybody? Within an EQ, we have a bunch of ways to change and shape sound. This is what we call a bell on an EQ. We have these different curves. Then we have something called as a low cut. I'll show you guys how to use this in a bit. This is a low cut. So you're cutting low frequencies. This is a high cut. We're cutting higher frequencies. And this is a bell, because apparently it looks like a bell. And then we have something called as shelves also. So this is a shelf. Yeah. So we're generally boosting frequencies beyond that frequency range. These are the different curves through which you can manipulate the sound of a source by changing the frequency content of that source. So say for example, if I wanted to add more body on this voice,
I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser.
Yeah. To me, it sounds too boxy right now, obviously, and this all has to be done in context to what you're mixing for. You can't in isolation do all of these things. That's another important point that we'll cover when we actually get into mixing tracks, but context is super important. What you're mixing for is super important. Yeah. If your song in itself is got a lot of low mid happening and you want to make your vocal sound boxy, it's just going to sound messy. So anyway, I'm just going to try to give you guys a few examples so you understand what I'm trying to explain through this. If you wanted to make this vocal sound fuller, you would end up
I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me down because I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't.
Yeah, makes sense. If you wanted to bring out more nasal texture out of the vocals, I would boost.
A loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me.
And this works the other way around also. If I wanted to take out more nasaliness from the vocal, then I would.
A loser and I use her, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me down because I know.
It's not evident here.
So don't knock down my door. So don't knock down my door.
Yeah, can you guys hear all these examples that I'm trying to show? And let's say you wanted to make the vocal bright, then we can boost everything upwards of, let's say, 4 kilohertz. Let's see what that sounds.
So don't knock down my door.
Yeah. Alright, so yes, that's a great question. How are shelves different from high or low cuts? So a high cut is actually cutting the frequency, whereas a shelf is boosting stuff from that point. So if I set a shelf, let's say, oh yeah, sure, sorry. So if I set a shelf here, yeah, you can see that what's happening is that, let's say my shelf is starting at around 10 kilohertz right now. So frequencies above this point are all being boosted and before it also. And what I'm changing right now is the Q of that shelf, which is how broad of a frequencies around it is it shifting. So a shelf is boosting frequencies generally above that range. So if I were to, let's say, work with a dynamic microphone. So to answer your question earlier, if I wanted to bring up more crispy sound of a dynamic microphone, I would use a shelf or a bunch of tools in conjunction with each other to get that texture. Overdoing this may also make a source sound too plasticky. Let me show you that with an example.
So don't knock down my door.
Again, I'm sorry I have to end up using words like plasticky, but I think it's easiest to visualize it. I usually prefer saying things like 5 kilohertz, 6 kilohertz and upwards, but for ease of understanding, I'm using these phrases or adjectives.
So don't knock down my door.
Yeah.
So don't knock down my door.
Did you hear? So if I overdo the high frequency range, that's not good. If there's not enough high frequency range, it's not going to sound bright either. Does that answer the question of high shelves? And a cut is essentially cutting the high frequencies beyond that point. So if I set a high cut, what that means is that there's not going to be.
So don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and I use.
So if I wanted to turn this into like a telephonic vocal, I could just.
So don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and I use her, so I don't need no.
Yeah, that's what a low cut does. High cut and a low cut does. It's essentially turned it into a telephonic sounding voice. Yeah. Cool. Any questions with EQ so far? Cool. Okay. Let's move on. Now we'll get to the next part of this. There are different kinds of EQs, but for today's session, I'm just going to stick to simple EQs like this, and you'll find different versions of these EQs in any plugin, any DAW that you use. So I'll walk you through DAW specific plugins also later. Cool. I'm also going to show you guys some free tools that you can use if you don't have access to these plugins. I'll tell you where to get them and how to use them. Okay, cool. So we're done with EQ. Now let's get on with. Oh, where's my Chrome screen? There it is. Okay. So we've understood what EQ is. Now let's understand what a compressor is. Okay. So to understand compressor, I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. So what we'll do is, let me first try to explain what the point of a compressor is. Now let's take the example of that super dynamic vocal. Where is that gone? There it is. Yeah, you see that we have this vocal that's super loud at one point, super soft at one point, very inconsistent. Yeah, so we want to balance these two out, and that's when we use something like a compressor. What I would say is the most simplest compressors to use are the ones where, and especially for vocals. Now this unfortunately is a paid tool, but I'm just gonna show you guys how this works for a second and what we can do with it. So can you guys see the before and after of the compressor? You see, this is the before and this is the after. And the more I compress it, the more even this is going to get. Yeah? Can you guys see it visually? What's happening? So obviously we don't want to compress it to a point where it becomes like one flat line. We want there to be some amount of dynamics. But let's listen for what this sounds like in the song with context to what we had before. Yeah, so this is what the compressed vocals sound like. Let me just quickly balance this out. And let's listen to it with the song, so you guys get to hear what I'm doing.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser.
Yeah, now let's just listen to this without the compression being applied.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Yeah, did you guys get the difference in the sound of it? Super. So now I'm going to explain what a compressor is, how it works, now that we've established what it actually does, like what the difference is in terms of what we hear it as. So what the compressor is essentially doing here is, it's in simple words like a volume knob. You could also do this manually if you wanted to, and if you had that much time, but that's essentially what it's doing, is that it's deciding a level beyond which, if the signal's crossing this level, it's going to bring the volume down. And that's the simplest way to understand what a compressor does, which is, now let's look at this signal for now. So you see this red thing that's coming down? That's deciding how much signal is being taken away. Yeah, I mean, that's showing us how much signal is being taken away. Okay, I think there's a better visual way to understand this. Sorry, give me a second. Yeah. Okay. All of this looks complex. It's not rocket science. It's super easy to understand though. I'm going to try my best to make it as easy as it is to understand. Okay, let's just listen to the vocals.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Can you see this red line? That's showing how much level is being reduced. So what a compressor is in simple is just a program or software here that is essentially bringing the level down every time the signal crosses this threshold or this level. So what we've done is we've manually told this plugin that, okay, I feel like the vocals are too dynamic and I want to set this in such a way that every time the signal crosses this threshold, that I want to bring the level down.
Well, I heard it all before.
So it's not compressing a lot on the soft part of this vocal, but when it goes to the louder,
so don't knock down my door.
Yeah, does that make sense? Because the signal is crossing more over the threshold when it's going to the louder part, and hence the signal is being reduced even more. Makes sense, everybody? Somewhat makes sense? Alright, cool. Let me show you guys another visual representation of this. And this is the way to understand. So there are multiple factors that affect the compressor. I'm not going to get into the complexities of what attack, release and ratio etc. do, but I'm going to tell you guys a general ballpark of how to set it up. Okay, so this threshold is this black line that you can see here. As I start bringing the threshold down, we'll start seeing the signal get compressed. Okay, so this is just a way to visually understand what a compressor is doing. So you see right now the signal is below the level of the compressor, so nothing's being compressed, which means that the signal is not crossed the threshold, so it has nothing to compress. Yeah, now the moment this signal is crossing the threshold, yeah, you see that this green signal is the signal that's the original signal. The blue signal is the signal after compression, and the red bit is the signal that's taken out from it, or rather the signal that's been reduced. I'll repeat that again. This green is the original signal. This blue waveform, blue-gray waveform, is the compressed signal. So when the signal has crossed the threshold, it's been compressed. Yeah, and if I set the threshold even further lower, you will see that it becomes flatter and flatter and flatter. And that same concept applies here, even to a vocal. So if we end up making a vocal too flat, is that good? No, right? Because the vocal sounds exciting because of the fact that it's got some movement. So we want to set the compressor in a way that we can hear the vocal evenly, but not to a point where we don't compress it to a point where it becomes flatlined. Yeah. Yes, in rock songs it'll probably need to be flatter. Yes, why? Can anybody tell me why? Probably because the music in itself doesn't move as much. Whereas in a jazz song, where the music in itself is moving a lot more, the vocals can be more dynamic. Mostly with pop music, if you listen to most pop records nowadays, there's super flat vocals, so which is a sound like they're not moving too much and they're sitting in one place. That's because the music in itself is also very loud and not very dynamic. So many scenarios where you'd want the vocals to be flat, many scenarios where vocals will have to be dynamic, but usually over compressing stuff will lead to vocals that sound like they lack energy or excitement. Okay, everybody understood what the threshold is? So what we'll do is, in the last part of this workshop, what I'm going to do is actually apply these practically on a bunch of examples and show you guys how to dial in the settings. Right now we'll just understand what these tools are and what these different functions mean. Okay, cool. Now comes the complex bit, and this is something that I'm going to try to, again, quickly explain as simply as possible. So pay close attention. Attack is how fast the compressor starts compressing. Okay, what that means is how soon after the signal crosses the threshold do we want the compression to start. So if we set the attack as slow attack, I know I'm going to mess this up anyway, but if I set this as a slow attack, which means that it's taking a few milliseconds before the signal crosses, it's not compressing the first part of the waveform, but it's compressing the second half of the waveform. Yeah, you guys can see that if the attack is very fast, or which means that it's attacking quicker, it's attacking the first bit of the waveform. And if I keep the attack slow, it's not attacking, or rather it's not compressing the first bit of the waveform, but the second half of the waveform. Did everybody understand what I just said? Yeah, please send a yes, because this is super critical to understand how to apply this practically on a vocal. If you have vocals that have a lot of transients meaning transients are these sharp sounds at the start of a source. So you see this here, this is a transient, this again here is a transient, this is a transient, yeah, like consonants, yes, this is a transient again. So music that is very rhythmic in nature and that has a lot of transients, like say scatting or rap vocals and stuff, where you want to preserve the transient, what would you set the attack as? Would it be fast or would it be slow attack? Slow attack. Super. Amazing. If you guys got this, then I think that's basically what I wanted to explain. And this is how attack is usually measured. Okay. Slow attack is anything upwards of 20 to 30 milliseconds. Fast attack is between 5 to 10 milliseconds. Actually, 10 milliseconds and above. 10 milliseconds above is slowish attack. Anything below 10 milliseconds is fast attack. Yeah. And attack is measured in milliseconds because it's telling the compressor how many milliseconds to wait before you start compressing the signal. Yes, it waits for every transient, and that is defined by the release. So I'll come to that. Did everybody get that bit? I'm trying to cram. It's actually hurting me to try to explain this in simple words, but I'm trying my best, because this, we usually in our entire course we spend 2 days just talking about compressors. So alright, so I hope you guys have understood what the attack and release is. Cool. Or attack is, at least. Now the release is how long the compressor keeps compressing. So the faster the release, it'll let go of the compression immediately. But since the attack here is again fast, it's going to start compressing again. So the release is how quickly or how slowly the compressor. Attack is how quickly it starts compressing. Release is how long it'll keep compressing the signal till. So the faster the release, which means the quicker it'll let go of the compression, and the slower the release means the longer it'll compress the signal. Yeah. And ratio, let's not even get into ratio for today. Yes, I'll show an example of where you need fast attack. Nikhil, I would love to talk about ratio, but I think half the people will leave this workshop if I start talking about ratio. So I'm just gonna skip that for today. I think that's beyond the purview of understanding. I'll tell you what general settings you can use for vocals. Yeah. So I would say that usually with most compressors, we should keep the ratio between 3 to 4. You don't need to go above 4 for most compressors. Yeah. Okay. When would we need quick fast attack and fast release? Let's quickly go over these examples. So let's say you had one good example that I can think of is, let's say you had a bunch of vocal harmonies and you didn't want the transient of those vocal harmonies to stick out, but you wanted them to sound flat and sit in the background. That's when you'd end up using a really fast attack, because then your harmonies are not sticking out and they sound like a wall of sound almost. Yeah. And when would you use slow attack? Is when you want the transients to stick out, when you want the vocals to sound almost like they're poking. Sometimes that's a good thing, and that's when we keep the attack slower. When would we need a quick release? Usually we don't need quick release with vocals. We want to keep it medium slowish. So this default setting, when we open about 100 milliseconds, is what is a good setting for the release of our vocals. Yeah. If we release it, say too quickly in the middle, this is what it sounds like.
I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser to try and slag me down, because I know you're right.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to try to show you guys an example of too fast of a release. Sometimes actually creates, it sounds like you can hear the compressor working its way through, which is not a good thing. We want the compressor to work in such a way that it's not really audible, that the level's being taken out of it. Yeah, which is why sometimes when you're initially dialing the compressor in and your ears are not too attuned to hearing for those changes in levels, I would dial them in such a way that if I can start hearing compression, that's usually a sign that you've overdone it. Yeah.
I'm a loser and a user, so
let me show you an example actually of what that is.
I'm a loser.
Right there. You can hear you can hear the
I'm a loser.
You can hear the level being taken out, right? It sounds like you've dropped a level there. That's not a good thing. That means we've over compressed the signal there.
I'm a loser. I'm a loser and a user, so I don't need no accuser.
Now in this case, I think attack of roughly 10 milliseconds, because I want to keep some of the transients on the vocals. Just to give you context of what I mean by 10 milliseconds, I'm just going to zoom in and show you what 10 milliseconds looks like. Minutes and seconds. 1 millisecond. Hold on, sorry. Yeah. So let's say if this is the transient, yeah, this is what 10 milliseconds looks like. Yeah. So which means that I'm skipping the entire transient and I'm compressing after that. So I'm making this part of the wave even, and I'm not compressing this first part of the wave. So that lets my texture of the vocal also be almost like retain that initial jump in the sound. Make sense to everybody what I'm trying to say here? I hope it's not getting too complex. Okay, cool. Basics of ratios. Ratio is essentially, to put in simple words, is how fast, how much the compressor is compressing. So there's two ways to define it. Threshold determines when the compression starts. Ratio determines how much of that compression is occurring. So think of it like, what is a good analogy that I can think of? How much flexibility it has for the signal to cross the threshold. Ratio is a ratio, right? So it has no units. It's something divided by something. But in simple words, it's like how porous, think of it like a porous substance. If the substance is completely hard, which means nothing can cross the threshold, which is high ratio. And if the wall is somewhat porous, then some signals allowed to go through, which means low ratio. Yeah. So if the ratio is 100:1, which means nothing is allowed to go above the threshold, which means that everything will be flatlined. And if that happens, that means it will sound clipped. So we don't want the ratio to be very high. We want it to roughly be between 3 to 5. Cool. When do I need fastest attack? When you don't want your transients to stick out. Yes. How do we balance the softest part of vocals to bring it up front with compression? You tell me. Your mixes sound good. I've heard your last mix. It sounds like you've done a good job on it. But yeah, usually you want to set it up in such a way that so there are two ways to do this. I would, if I end up compressing too much, then that's not a good situation either. We use something called automation, manually changing the level of a track. That is what we can use to bring the softer parts of the vocal up. Cool. I think we'll go into specific examples. That should solve a lot of your questions and doubts. Alright, super. Okay. Compression, have I covered what I wanted to talk about? Downward, upward compression. I don't think we should get into that today. I mean, no, we don't need to talk about that. It's beyond the point of this workshop. No, it means that the signal will be reduced by 1 dB when the compression starts. So for every 4 dB that goes out above the threshold, 1 dB is compressed. Yeah, for those who don't want to understand that, you can ignore that. That's fine. Okay, cool. And then finally we have this knob here, which is usually called as output gain or makeup gain, which stands for how much the signal is. So we're obviously losing signal in this process by compression, right? So some signals being taken out, some levels being reduced.
It all before. So don't knock down my door.
Yeah. So the way that I can compensate for this is by increasing the output gain. This is also called as makeup gain or output gain. So essentially to make sure that the level of your compressor before and after turns out to be the same. So now let's quickly do a recap and go through all the stuff that we've spoken about. You guys know how to get a decent sounding recording. And by the way, what we'll do is if you guys have specific songs and you want inputs from me on some of your tracks or whatever, I think, Rishi, we can make this group active and people can send in their sessions or songs here, and I can, whenever I get some free time, I can go through your songs and tell you how to approach it and what you might be doing right or wrong. Yeah, cool. Okay, so first we get the vocal recording right by making sure that it's got the right tonal balance by not being too close to the mic, too far from the mic. We get the right texture by ensuring that we're not moving away from the mic too much and that the right sound that we want of the vocals is captured. In the third part, in the third aspect of the recording, we also ensure that it's not too dynamic. Now if we get this dynamics right at the recording stage, then we don't have to end up using too much compression. Yeah, but if the vocals are super dynamic, then we need to use decent amount of compression along with it. After we have the vocals recorded, then we use something like an EQ to add and remove a certain set of frequencies from that inherent source. Like let's say for example, if we ended up recording too close to the mic and we had too much proximity on the mic, we'd end up taking some of that body in the lower frequency range from 100 to 500 Hertz out. Or if the vocals were not bright enough, then we'd increase the high frequency range. And once that's done, then we'd control the overall dynamics of the vocal using a compressor. Yeah, so that way we can ensure that the vocals sit fine with the rest of the elements in the song. Cool. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock so I don't talk about this for too long. Cool. Did you guys understand how the compressor works? Or at least the basics of it? So I'll just show you guys 2-3 tools that you can use. The easiest tools to use for compression. If you can get your hands on RVox, this is a great tool for vocal compressors. All you have to do is just pull down this knob, compressor knob.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. I'm a loser and a user.
So let's just listen to these two lines first.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Yeah, if you listen to this with the track, it'll probably make sense of how it fits better.
Well,
Second.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. Well, I heard it all before.
This is without the compressor.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door.
Is everybody able to hear the difference? Yeah, so the soft part is automatically being brought up by the makeup gain. Yeah, so when we increase the level after the signal is being compressed, so what's happening is that when the compressor is being applied, the distance between the loud parts and the soft parts is brought closer together. And now with bringing up the makeup gain, you're bringing everything up. So essentially what you're doing is you're reducing this dynamic range, that is the difference between the soft guys and the loud guys. Cool. Okay, so the more we start compressing, the more even.
Well, I heard it all before, so don't knock down my door. Well, I heard it all before, So don't knock down my door.
Yeah, vocals feel like they're super inside the song at this point in time. Cool. Okay, great. This is one tool you can use. Let me also show you guys the other free tools that we can use. The easiest one to show is, okay, so with you get a similar compressor even with any DAW that you use. In Pro Tools we have this default compressor that comes with it. We have attack, we have release, ratio, and threshold. So the way to set this compressor, understand where to start compressing.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
Okay,
Well, I heard it all before.
I need to compress.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
Yeah, this is not as efficient as this, so I need to make the gap even smaller. So I'm going to bring the threshold down even more.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
Yeah, understood how to do this. Now I'm also going to show you guys. Just give me 1 second. What is this called? I forgot the name. Ignore the number of plugins I have. Where is Ajay? Do you remember what those plugins were that we were using? The free plugins that we recently. We can just get these guys to use. What's that called? I forgot the name. Analog Obsession. Thank you. There it is. All right. Okay, here you go. So these are all free. You can get them. I'll send you guys the link at the end of this workshop where you can just use these different tools and you get a bunch of compressors. There is, let's go to, they have weird names, but let's just use one of these. Yeah.
Well, I heard it all before.
Okay, let's set this. Hold on. What I'll do is, so all of these compressors will have the same functions. I'm going to try to open this easier to understand. TV comp is easier probably, yeah.
Well, I heard it all before.
So we bring the threshold down.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
Okay, so now I've compressed the signal.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
This is after compression.
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door. Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
Okay, now that's a bit much. But
Well, I heard it all before. So don't knock down my door.
so now the thing that I guess you guys will have to practice at the end of all of this is to hear for these things and start applying them on some of your songs or your recordings at home. And I think it'll take a little bit of time to get used to hearing this stuff. But what I would say is, once I send you guys the presentation and some notes also, you can set up these plugins and try to use them and try to experiment with them. Yeah, cool. Ideal vocal chains for intimate vocals versus powerful vocals, and then songs that include both with corresponding plugins. Yeah, so what I'll do is I have a few songs lined up which we'll go through. So there's like a folk song, there's a pop song, and some hip hop stuff. I haven't gone through something that's very loud, but let me see if I can show you guys something along those lines. Yeah. yes, we'll go through that. We'll go through a bunch of songs and I'll show you guys a few different vocal chains that you can experiment with. Alright. Whatever plugins you guys can get hands on from what I'm showing today, great. If not, you can do all this stuff using the free tools also, yeah? I think start off with using the free tools, and then there are specific plugins that can be used for specific things that they're good at doing. And then you can look at investing and buying these plugins. Or those of y'all who crack plugins here, then you can just get these anyway. Alright, cool. So compression we've cleared. Now let's move on to effects. Now this is the most fun, also the most annoying thing, and probably the most creative part of this process. Everything else is a little more technical, but getting the right effects is what can make a vocal sound like amazing also. So you know what, I'm actually going to take one of the examples from here and show you what it sounds like with and without the effect. So let's go to, you just go to castles. Alright, okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna, this is a very, I don't know what to call this genre, but I would say it's just it's mostly piano, string arrangements, so kind of almost pop music. So I'll play you guys the song first. We'll listen to the vocals and then we'll listen to the vocals without the effects, so we can understand what it sounds like without those effects. This song again isn't using too many effects, but I wanted to explain how much of an importance effects has in terms of create depth in a song. Okay, so let's just quickly listen to maybe the intro and the first verse of the song. Cool, you guys let me know if you can hear stuff clearly. Okay, I'm just going to try to
recall a time when we sat for hours contemplating lucid endings. Step out of your doorway, just make it happen. You are special, truly special. Said all I ever can. We're sure that this was it, and you cave in without a fight. Time and time again, I failed to understand. I cannot save you from yourself.
Yeah, I'm just gonna play this without the vocals for the first half of the song. Cool.
I recall a time when we sat for hours contemplating lucid endings. Step out of your doorway, just make it happen. You are special, truly special. Said all I ever can.
So what do you guys feel? What did that do overall to the sound of the vocals? How do you guys describe what the effects are doing to the vocals? Okay, fuller. Alright. That's one way to describe it, alright. Yes, depth for sure. Yes, ethereal. Yeah, filling the spectrum. What does it do emotionally when you listen to it with the effects versus without the effects? Yeah, I mean, I think more than a great source of recording, a great vocalist, probably. This is what I mean by good dynamics. Yeah. Yes, it is Pratika's voice. Yeah. Yeah, husky vocal feel, sort of, yeah, because we're bringing up certain frequency range. But it's making, as you can hear, it's giving more sustain to the voice also, right? Because you can hear much more sustain on the vocal. You can hear like there's a tail at the end of the line. But emotionally, what it's doing is, yes, it's adding to the overall emotional element of the song. Yeah. So if you listen to the same part with and without the effects, it plays such a huge role in trying to create that connect between the track. So the piano that we're listening to right now, in itself also has a sustain and has effects on it, right? So let's just listen to the piano by itself. Yeah, you can hear that the piano is in a space right now. And the reason why the vocals don't sound like they fit with this piano right now is because the piano is in a different space and the vocals are too dry, feel like they're not in that same space. So by adding these effects, we're essentially making sure that the vocals are sounding like they're in the same space as that piano. Yeah, let's just listen to it.
I recall a time when we sat for hours. I recall a time when we sat for hours, contemplating lucid endings.
Yeah, so it's making it feel much bigger and much more cinematic, so to say. Yeah, and as the song progresses, we can actually hear that. You see, the song clearly has an arc that you can see, right? The song builds up towards the end. Yeah, I'll come to where the vocals are sitting, where the piano's sitting, and all of that. Yes, sure. So I'm just going to play you guys maybe the second half of this song and the build up, because that's again a critical section that I want you guys to pay attention to in terms of effects. And if you notice, there's not much happening in terms of effects. There's only 3 effects happening. There's one plate reverb, there's another hall reverb, and that's it. That's essentially all that's happening, which I'm surprised is just that. Yeah, so that reverb is giving it that sense of space right now. So I'm just going to play the second half where the vocals get louder, because it's a little more apparent there. There is compression. I'll show you. There is compression, definitely. Yeah, this is the compression that's happening. So you'll see, so when this needle moves left, that's the signal that's being compressed.
Stood beside you, said all I ever can. Now it's castles in the air, and you just cave in and never ends. I know you've heard enough, I'll say it once again. I cannot save you from yourself.
I'll just play this section without the effects so you get a sense of.
I stood beside you, said all I ever can. Now it's castles in the air, and you just cave in and never ends. I know you've heard enough.
Alright, cool. So there's a bunch of stuff that we still have to do on this, which I'll talk to you guys. Right now you must be hearing that there's a clash happening between the piano and the vocals, right? I'd kept that intentionally there so we can understand how to create that space. But right now what I wanted you guys to pay attention to is how that reverb was giving the vocals that sense of space. Yeah. So now to understand how to use reverb, I'm just first gonna show you guys maybe 2-3 different kinds of reverbs and how to use them. So this is, hold on, how is this working? Okay.
Breakthrough, stood beside you, stood beside you, said all I ever can.
So we'll see what each of these plugins is doing and what the reverb in itself does. So let's just listen to only the reverb first. Let me just do that maybe. So the way that I'm doing this in Pro Tools right now is that the vocals are going to a separate track, and that track is only for the reverb effect. Okay, so you can do this. Yeah, this is what we call as a send return, or using it as a bus. For those who don't want to get into all of that, you could just use this knob on a reverb to change the amount of reverb that's being affected. Dry and wet stands for: wet means affected signal, dry means raw signal. So 100% dry means no reverb, 100% wet means only reverb, and 50 means 50 of the original signal and 50 of the affected reverberated signal. So let me actually put one directly on the vocal track and show you guys. Okay, let's take reverb. All right, there you go. So this dry wet knob decides how much of the reverb is going to be applied to the.
I know that you don't like it, but stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever reach you and you break through. I stood beside you.
Okay, so I'm quickly first going to walk you guys through these different points, what this stuff is, and then we'll talk about how to dial in these settings. Yeah, cool. So first of all, different kinds of reverbs. There's a hall, there's a church, plate, room, blah blah, whatever. All these different reverbs sound different. Usually the bigger the room, the more this decay will be. So what does this decay mean? If you guys have ever been to a church or say a large performance hall, and if you clap in that room, it feels like that clap is sustaining for a very long time, right? So what's happening in that situation? Yeah, so there's a difference between reverb and echo, and I'll come to that in a bit. But there's, like, if you clap, it almost sounds like this. It sounds like a long sustain on that clap, right? Why do you think that's happening? Because what's happening in a space like that is, when sound is being created, it's reflecting from all of these different surfaces. Yeah, and those reflections take a little bit of time to, after the signals being created, to reach our ears. And all signals, all these reflections that reach our ear between something called as fusion time, is our brain tends to perceive them as one continuous sound. And that's what we hear as a reverberated sound. Imagine if you were able to hear each and every reflection as an individual sound. If we clap, then it would sound like tuck 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 tuck, right? But that's not what our brain does, because that would be an annoying world to live in. It essentially turns that into one sustained sound, which is what we hear as reverb, or what our brain tends to perceive as reverb. So the more sustained there is, that means that the bigger that sense of space is. So the longer the decay time, the bigger the perception of how big that space is. Yeah, so let me just actually show you guys with an actual example. 1 second. No, resonance is a completely different concept. Reflection is a completely different concept. So let's just go to hall, and I'm going to keep it super short. This will almost sound like a bathroom right now.
I know that you don't like it. Stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever reach you.
Yeah, this also has the same amount of reverb, but now it sounds like a small room now, right? Can everybody hear that it feels like a small...
I know that you don't like. I know that you don't like.
I'm just going to exaggerate it a little bit.
I know that you don't like it. But stop pretending.
This is what this sounds like with a small decay. I'll explain this in a sec.
I know that you don't like it.
So it's a small room versus, let's say...
I know that you don't like it. But stop pretending you're ordinary.
Yeah, versus...
I know that you don't like it.
Can you tell this difference in sense of how, in what space the vocal sounds? With obviously a larger delay, it sounds like the decay time. It sounds like the vocals are in a much bigger room as opposed to a shorter decay time. Yeah. Now, if we end up keeping this decay time really high, what's happening is that the sustain of that word is actually getting into the start of the next word. If we set this decay really large, tell me what it's doing overall to the intelligibility and the tone of the voice.
I know that you don't like it, but stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever reach you and you break through. I stood.
Yeah, so it's actually muddling up the entire intelligibility of the vocals also. So the thing is, everybody's definition of what the right amount of reverb should be is different, and I can't tell you guys what the right thing is for you, but I think there's a lot for you guys to play around with here and find a sound that works for you. So the way I see it, or at least the way that I like to perceive it, I don't like stuff that's too drowned in reverb, and I don't like stuff that's too dry either. The best way to understand reverb is that you should be able to tell when it's taken away, but it's not something that should be evident when you listen to it. Obviously, there are some styles of music that need a lot of reverb, in which case go for it and apply it. But the way that I feel is that it should be more like a subtle effect than something that's very audibly heard. Which is funny because actually in this song it's quite audible, but this is not the actual mix session. So that's that. So cool. So you guys understood what decay time is doing? Everybody's clear about what this function is doing. If you want the vocals to sound big, then decay time has to be high. If you want them to sound like they're in a medium-sized room, I would keep it somewhere between 2 to 3.
I know that you don't like it, but stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever reach you.
Yeah, makes sense. Not necessarily the signal has to be finished before the next transient comes in. No, because then in that case it would be too short of a sustain. We want some sustain on the vocal, so no, that's not necessary. Yes, damping is a different thing altogether. Okay, cool. Alright, that's clear to everybody. Now the thing is that different reverbs or different reverb plugins will apply different effects or different sort of qualities in terms of the reflections. So there are 4 main reverbs if you think about it, and probably don't need to use stuff beyond that. There's something called as a plate reverb. The way that it works is actually designed like a plate on which there used to be a speaker, and then there'd be a mic that would capture the reflections that was being played on the tape from the other side. These are like really old school technologies. That's how reverb was created, by playing it on an actual metal plate. And that's what we call a plate reverb. So let me open up an example of a plate reverb. This is my favorite go-to plate reverb plugin. Whoa, sorry. That's 100% wet, which is why.
I know that you don't like it, but stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever
So in a in a plate reverb, we don't have decay time, but we have damper. So this determines how quickly or how late the reflections are dying out. So the more higher the damper, the more the reflections will be. Yeah. If you guys can notice, there's a completely different tone and texture as opposed to what we were using before this. Yeah.
I know that you don't like it, but stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever reach you.
Let's listen to it with the piano.
I know that you don't like it. I know that you don't like it. But stop pretending you're.
Now you can actually listen to the piano and tell that the piano feels like it's in a bigger space. So by definition, to make both of these feel like they're in the same space and they're performing in the same space, we'll have to go with the reverb that's slightly bigger than this. So let's try increasing the.
I know that you don't like it, but stop pretending you're ordinary and you're careless. I hope I ever reach you and you break through.
Yeah, makes sense with what this reverb is doing essentially. To put it in simple words, it's creating sense of depth and it's adding sustain to the overall sound, or creating that sense of space that we hear. Yeah. Cool. I am just going to check a couple of questions. When to use it as an insert, when to use it as a bus. I personally prefer using it directly on a bus because you can have a lot more control. Like in this case now, if I wanted to put two plugins, that means that two reverberated signals are going into each other, which is not ideal. So using it as a bus is much better. For those who understand what a bus is, you can implement that. For those who don't, it's fine. Just use it this way. All right. Any questions or doubts? Let's take 5 minutes. I'm just going to quickly take a 5-minute break. I'll see you guys here back at 5:15, and then we'll run through a few examples where I'll walk you guys through a few signal chains and how to use those plugins, how to set them up, and what different ways to get these things working with each other. So I'll quickly just walk you through first what are the factors to look for in a good mix. I won't spend too much time on this theory, and then we'll get into the practical application stuff. Yeah. All right, cool. In the meanwhile, if you guys have any questions, just send them to me and keep. I'll just quickly answer them. So it's 5:11 right now. I'll just take a quick 5-minute break and I'll see you guys here at 5:15. Yeah. In the meanwhile, since you guys are just sitting, I might as well just play these songs so you can get yourself familiarized with them.
If I ever get around the top, doesn't mean my mind will stop. I can't turn around. And if I ever see your face once more, will I just smile or will my jaw hit the floor? If my roots are uprooted, would my leaves still care to grow? When I ride down the 48, keep my window down, let the cold wind rush in. Close it up, now it's time to sleep. My blanket covers me, but my thoughts run free. If I throw away the covers, will my thoughts freeze?
Okay, so let's get started with the practical application now. So I have a few songs here. But actually, before I get into all of this, just wanted to get a sense of how many y'all are hobbyists and how many of you are actually looking to pursue audio engineering and music production as a career. Just a show of hands, how many are looking to do this from a career point of view? Nikhil is a hobbyist. All right. Yes, Rishabh, I know you're doing it as a career. All right. Kochu is also doing it as a career. Yes, I've spoken to you guys. All right. Yeah. Super. Only reason why I asked is for those who actually want to learn all the stuff that I've spoken about today in greater detail, want to spend more time actually learning how to apply these skills to build a career. We have a full-time course at Chris Park Audio Academy. If you want to come and meet me at the studio also, you can drop me a message. My number's on the group and we can discuss what your career prospects are, how you want to set this up. Yeah. No, it's not an online course, unfortunately, because as you can tell, it's not the best way to learn this stuff online, because there's a lot of limitations in terms of what you're hearing with. You're probably wearing different headphones, and then when you get into the details, it's hard to cover this stuff online. So ours is more of a online, completely practical focused course in audio engineering and music production. It's a 16-month course. Yeah. Yes, I know, Rohit, you are. Yes, looking forward to seeing you guys. Alright, cool. Okay, let's get started with the songs. There we go. Okay, so I have 3 different songs here. How about I let you guys decide which song to actually go through first and then apply this to. So there's this one folk-ish track that I'm gonna play. Yeah, this song is by an artist called Rishabh Purohit, super talented musician. He's from Berkeley. Very, very talented guy. Alright, that's the first song. The second song is...
If I ever get around it.
Yeah. This is Thoughts Freeze by Adi Rao. And the third is what I played you guys earlier, which is Castles by Easy Wanderings.
A time when we sat for hours contemplating.
Okay, this is that song. And then the first song is by Kunal. This is like a more of a hip-hop pop track.
अब वो पूछे मेरा हाल कहती मुझे how you been उसको भी पता मैं रहा पहले जैसा नहीं जिंदगी हसीन new cash new lifestyle लेकिन कुछ
So different styles, different zones. Can we get a show of hands? What song do you guys want to do? Yeah, I'll just wait for everybody to... Cool. Okay, 4 people saying folk, 5 people saying folk. Okay, so let's do... Okay, I'll try my best to cover all if I can. But, ठीक है. Folk and castles is what seems to be this. Okay, cool. Alright. So I think first thing to understand is that different styles of music will need a different approach in terms of how we approach the processing. Now, the way we do this with a folk track versus the way we do it with a, the first pop track that we heard will be very different. Yeah, because again, context is important. If you just look at this simple, I think that's the easiest way to understand. Look at the dynamics of this track. Can you see how even it is? That's the track that we're mixing to, versus let's see the Where's the folk track gone? I mean, this also kind of does look even out, but when we listen to it, I think we'll understand better that a folk track has a lot more movement happening within it. Yeah, so it's important to understand how to work with the source and what the style of that specific genre or specific music is. You can't apply the same concept everywhere. You have to understand what you're working or what song you're working on, and then accordingly apply those things. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll start off with just the rough dry vocals, and we'll go ahead and step by step I'll walk you guys through what we need to do to get to a track that sounds well balanced. So there are essentially three things that we want to look for when we're trying to set up a good mix. We want enough depth in the vocals and the track. If there's no depth, then it'll sound like the vocals are. What do I mean by depth? Let me first clarify. Depth is what we can define as the sense of movement of back and forth of an element in a song. So the best way to understand depth is if a song doesn't have depth, which means there's not going to be separation between elements. Okay, so what do I mean by separation? When there is distance between two different elements, yeah, then we can say that they have separation, and that's what gives us the definition of depth. So usually with most styles of music, vocals will be the most will be the element that's most in focus, right? So we want to create that sense of depth between the track and the vocals. If we create too much depth, it sounds like the vocals are slapped on top of the track and they're not working with the track. If we keep the vocals too inside the track, then it sounds like you can't pay attention to what you want to listen for in the track. So setting the right amount of depth is key, and depth can be achieved by two things, which is how the levels are placed, how the level of the track is, and the individual level of the frequencies using an EQ and with reverb. And sense of depth is created primarily through reverb. So that is how you can place an element in this space, 2D space. Second is the width of an element. Width is where an element is placed in the stereo field. Now, usually with main vocals, we keep them in the center, but if we have backing vocals and we have a bunch of other layers, we keep them on the sides. But that can also create a sense of width. And width is super important to get that sense of bigness of a track. Yeah. In fact, that's what a reverb also does. It adds more width because it adds more reflections which are coming to your left and right channels. And then the third most important factor that matters is your height. And height usually means dynamics of a track. So if a track that's super flat will not sound exciting, and a track that's very, very dynamic will also not sound exciting. So we want the right amount of height in a track to feel that sense of excitement, to feel that sense of emotion out of the track. So in this case, like this song, when I listen to a song first, I'll listen for where that height of the track is. So let's say in this song, it's clearly evident that the song is starting off slow and then building up, right? So the making sure that this point, and maybe you guys can go and listen to this track that's released. It's called Castles in the Air by Easy Wanderings later. This mix for some reason isn't sounding like the stuff that we put out anyway. So you can hear that clear lift that's being created from this point to the actual build up in the song. Let me just play it to you so you hear what I'm saying by.
And you just cave in, it never ends. I know you've heard enough, I'll say it once again. I cannot save you from yourself.
Okay, this session doesn't really do justice to the song. You should actually check out what's been released. But you can tell here again, I feel like there's not appropriate height happening in what we're listening to at the moment. So my job as a mix engineer would be to create the right amount of height. Because are you guys feeling this point where everything is coming in? Because I'm not at the moment.
I cannot save you from yourself.
Because all those strings that are coming in at that point, they should be a lot more forward and really take center stage, because that's the point that clearly the artist wants to take, create that sense of crescendo, right? So height is super important. Height is confusing. Height is essentially, just think of it as dynamic range. Lesser height means that there is not too much movement. More height means there's more movement in the track. That's the simplest way to understand it. And the thing is, the thing about height that is challenging is that if there is too much of it, it'll make it very distracting. And if there's too little of it, then it'll sound flat and not exciting. So too much is irritating and too little is unexciting to listen to. So setting the right dynamics of a track is what height is. Is that clear to everybody? Should we move on? Alright, so let's get started with the folk track. Alright. I usually go over what height and depth is in a lot more detail, but that's the best way to understand how vocals or how any mix or anything interacts. Maybe, when next time you're listening to music critically, just try to imagine these three points and try to understand what they mean to you specifically, and maybe that'll help you with your mixing process. Okay, cool. So here we have the vocals. Let's just listen to the raw vocals first. Okay, I'm gonna have to make this a little loud so everybody can hear.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं.
So actually let's listen to it once with the track so you guys know what the song is. And you know what, I'll play it without any processing on it right now. Let's just listen to the vocals raw as they are and the track as it is, and then we'll figure out how to mix this vocal on this track.
कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, बिन सतनाम भजन यह बिरथा आयु जाय रही, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
Okay, cool. So now pay attention to the first thing. Do you guys think this vocal is too dynamic, not too dynamic? What's the verdict? What do you guys feel? Quite dynamic, right? Yeah. And how can you tell? Certain sections where it's sitting with the track, certain section where it's not sitting with the track. Yeah, where it feels like it's the right level, and then some sections where it really peaks out. So the way to understand this is, one thing I would suggest is don't think about all of this visually, okay? Because if you start applying a visual aid to understanding how compression and stuff works, that's just the worst way to think about these things. Just use your ears to understand these things. Anyway, now let's listen to just the track, so we'll know that the track in itself is not moving too much, and let's see that is there too much movement happening in the track. Yeah. So not much movement happening at all, right? There's not like a strong kick or a snare or whatever like this. The track is fairly consistent in terms of the elements in it, in terms of the movement of the track. So let's just listen to one small section here, this phrase here, and we'll hear how much we need to compress. This should be the deciding factor of telling us how much we need to bring the level down by.
कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे.
So now this मैं कासे कहूँ line is somewhat at a correct level, but the line before that is not at all. It's super loud.
से कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ.
So that should be the deciding factor of where and what part of this signal we want to compress. So this is the bit that we want to compress. Actually, not even that. This is the bit we want to compress. Make sense? How would we do that now? We should first EQ the signal, but we'll get to that since we're talking about compression. Let's just do that. How would we do that? Let's take, I'll use one of the free tools actually. Sure. Let's take, what can I use? Okay, cool. No. Sure. So I'm just going to loop this section and play only this. That's too much. Okay, great. Now what is happening here is we've set the threshold of the compressor in such a way that it's only compressing at the peaks, but it's not compressing the soft parts. Yeah? Let's listen to this.
कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ. कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ. कोई ना माने कहीं बिन सतनाम भजन.
Now let's just listen to this without this compressor.
कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ. कोई ना माने कहीं.
Yeah? Can you guys hear what I'm trying to go achieve with the compressor right now? Yeah? Alright, super. Okay. Cool. What I'll do now is, unfortunately, I'll have to change this compressor because I'm going to set this attack to about 9 to 10 milliseconds. I don't want to take off the transients entirely.
कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ. कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ. कोई ना माने कहीं.
Okay, now to me it feels like the vocals are moving somewhat in the same space as the track is. Yeah, let's listen to this section and see if the settings that we've dialed in with the compressor have achieved that or not. Yeah.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं. मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं.
This is with the compressor.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं. मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं.
Yeah, sounds super distracting, right? Cool. Does compressor wait for each transient, or is it continuous? It's waiting for each transient after the release is over. So if your release is super fast, it'll start compressing every 10 milliseconds. If your release is set to 200 milliseconds, it'll look for the transient that comes after 200 milliseconds. Got it? Alright, okay. So now if we wanted to this to compress more and wanted to even it out more, then we can bring the release up. Anyway, now we actually skipped a step. We should have started off with EQing first, which is why in my chain the first thing here is an EQ. So the first thing that we want to do with an EQ is to take off the information, the stuff that is unnecessary for the vocals. Now in this vocal range, let's try to identify what frequency range is not necessary. Now this is, let's try to hear the ultra low frequency range. This is all the information below 75 Hertz, 73 Hertz.
कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं.
So to me right now, when I listen to this, by default, what part of the vocal range based on the vowels and stuff that I just showed you guys, what would you say is really prominent in this vocal? Let's see if you guys can, I'll know how many of y'all can hear stuff clearly then. What frequency range would you say is exaggerated on the vocals right now? Feels like it's sticking out more than it should. Low mid, but if I were to ask you in terms of vowels or frequency, what frequency would that be? It's just lower than 400 is what I would say. Yeah, somewhere around that. Good job. Super. 250 Hertz. Good. So you guys are able to understand.
मैं कैसे कहूँ.
So this first bump that we usually see, that's what we call the fundamental of a voice. Without getting into too much complexity, that is going to be the lowest pitch or the lowest register of that.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई.
Now let's listen.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई.
This is the range that's sticking out, right? This boxiness. So we want to cut this frequency range out just a little. So one suggestion that I would give you guys that helped me a lot when I was initially doing mixes was that if you're making cuts, try to make them narrow, and if you're doing boosts, try to do wider boosts. Yeah, so when you're cutting, try to be precise of what frequency range and what you're trying to cut. And if you're trying to boost a specific given frequency range, try to do wider, more broader moves, because when you're adding frequencies, you're changing the tone, you're shaping the tone of that source, and when you're cutting, you're taking something specific out of it. So always try to balance it out in such a way that you can, whatever you're taking out is more narrow, more precise, and whatever you're boosting is slightly more general in nature. Yeah, so now let's listen for the vocals with just the.
मैं कैसे माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना.
There, I'm just bypassing these two plugins with the track will give you guys insights into how you can get some sense of depth on the track. Right now, there's too much movement.
कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ.
But again, the key here is we need to retain some of this movement. Yeah. So what I usually do, the best way that I have found to work with this is to do compression in steps. Okay, so not to do compression in one go. And the best way to do that is by applying some compression on the vocal, then later on applying some compression on the submix, and then obviously when you're doing the master, there's going to be some compression happening then as well. So making that compression happen in steps is what will really help you make sure that you're not overdoing something. Obviously there are certain scenarios where you need to do a lot of it, but for the most part doing it in steps really helps. And that's the second part to understand, is that simply put, if you're using multiple compressors, try to keep the ratio lower. That's the easiest way to explain that. Okay, cool. Now this is the vocals with the EQ and
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं.
Okay, so I still feel that it's sticking out a little bit more than it should at this point. Did everybody feel that? Or was it just me? Should I play it again?
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं.
Just a little bit, right? Not too much, just a little bit. So how would we do that? Mane is too loud. Yes. There's two ways to do this now. We can either bring the threshold down more, or we can increase the ratio. I think in this scenario, this would be the right place to bring the threshold down slightly more.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
Okay, that's not really helping. Okay, I'll tell you why that's not helping also. It's because on the mane, the way that the word mane has been sung, it's a specific frequency range that's sticking out, which will now bring me to what a multiband is. In simple words, a multiband is just like a compressor but works for a specific set of frequencies. So now I know that that mane is in that nasal frequency range. Yeah, it's right there. So I'm gonna only compress that frequency range instead of compressing the entire. There. Problem solved. Can everybody hear that? I'm just gonna play it again.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
If you want to make it slightly more drastic, we can compress more there.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं.
This is now without.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने.
Oh, now you can tell how annoying that range gets, right? Super. So everybody got a general idea of what the multiband is doing. It's doing the same thing that a compressor is doing. Yeah, the reason why the normal compressor didn't work on this Balu is because a normal compressor sees all frequencies equally, and the way our ears work is that we tend to hear certain frequencies more, and because that vocal is more dynamic in that range, it's sticking out more to us. So there was one way to fix it, which is to compress it more. But if we could figure out that it was in that frequency range, that it was that mid frequency range that was sticking out, we're just compressing that bit and taking the signal out from only the mid range of the vocals. So we're just being more precise with the compression instead of overdoing the compression. That's the pro of doing this. You could very well achieve this by bringing the threshold down more as well. Alright, cool. Yes, helps us with maintaining the dynamics as well, so we don't end up over compressing. Cool. So here is where we've landed. Now if I wanted to add more tone and texture and character to this vocal, what frequency range would you say? Okay, let me just listen to the track and then we can take a call on where to add.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I actually feel like that mid-range, that nasal frequency is sticking out a lot on that vocal, and it's taking away from the pleasant nature of the song. I mean, we all agree that the song in itself is I mean, I think this is the same song, right? Yeah, it is. I think this is his interpretation of Doha, and it's talking about, basically, in simple words, the song is meant to be pleasing, is meant to feel calming and pleasing. So we want to take away the stuff that's making us feel like it's not pleasing at the moment. And what we'll do is we'll identify the section that brings out that nasal texture from the voice, and we'll take that out.
मैं कैसे कहूँ मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
Feels a lot more even and pleasant to listen to, right? Does everybody agree? At least to me it does.
कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं बिन.
Took off the stuff that was first sticking out from the vocals, then ended up bringing the dynamic range of the vocals down using a compressor, then specifically compressed just the mid-range on the vocals a little bit, and now we have to, if we want to add more tone and texture to this voice, we can. So now, see, the thing is, there are 100 different ways that you can reach this part. It doesn't necessarily mean that what I'm doing is the best way to do this. You guys can have your interpretations of it, and that's the beauty of working with music, right? There's no one way of doing anything. In fact, even more so with audio, because there's no fixed 100% right or wrong way of doing anything. As long as you can make it work for the emotion of the song, the idea works. So now we come to the point where I want to add some texture back into the vocals. Should we try making it bright? Should we try making it actually opposite of bright? Should we try making it duller? What approach would you guys say we should take with this? Let me just get a consensus in terms of what you guys want. Okay. Let's try with the bright approach. Okay, you know what? Let's try to do the bright approach and see what it sounds like on this track, and see if that works for the vibe and the zone of this song. Okay, cool. So one way to do that is what I showed you guys earlier, which is using the high shelf. Okay, you can just do that here. I'm just going to add in frequencies upwards of 9 kilohertz. So
कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं बिन सतनाम भजन यह बिरथा आयु जाय रही मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
okay, there's a bunch of frequencies that are clashing from the track with the vocals also.
सतनाम भजन यह बिरथा आयु जाय रही मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
So if you had to describe this, to me now it feels like the vocals are sounding more polished. है ना? It feels like the vocals have more sheen, more of that brightness, more of that forward texture. Yeah, very crisp sounding. So again, now this is not necessarily a wrong direction to take with this song. I personally don't think this is the approach I would take. I would want it to sound duller. I would want, not duller necessarily, but I wouldn't want it to sound very bright. But you know what? Let's try to explore a couple more things down this path and try to get more forwardness out of the vocals and see what that sounds like. Another plugin that I would recommend you guys could use is, but I won't be able to use that today. We could use, let's see if this works. Let's use something else instead. This is too many plugins. Okay. So I'm going to use what is called a saturator, which essentially adds harmonics to a source. In simple terms, harmonics are what's an easy way to explain this? Basically, to think of it in a simple way, it'll this is going to bring up the way we've set it up right now. To go, if you set it on third order harmonics, it's going to bring out more higher frequency content out of it. So to understand harmonics, we need to understand the concept of what standing waves and harmonics are, and I think we won't get into all of that. But in simple terms, if you see these different frequencies that are lighting up, right? And there's a balance between the fundamental and the other frequencies. So a saturator increases the higher frequencies with respect to the fundamental. That's, in simple words, that's what it does. Cool. Yes, to answer your question, Balu, the reason why we do EQ first is because it doesn't make sense to compress the information that we don't want, like the low frequency rumble on the vocal, the low mid information, the nasal texture. So might as well get rid of all the stuff and then compress the information that we actually want. Yeah? Okay. So now let's listen to this with the saturation.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं बिन.
Okay, now let's just listen to where we've reached from where we started. This is what our track, what our vocal was.
कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने.
Yeah, you see what we've done is we've removed the boxiness from the vocals. We've removed the nasal texture. We've balanced out the dynamics. We've taken out that nasal texture, which I think we need to take out a little bit more. And we've made overall the vocals now feel forward. So in terms of depth, if I had to define this, what would you say has happened now? The vocals suddenly feel a lot more forward, correct? Everybody feels the same way? Like earlier they're feeling like they sound muddled and behind. Now they feel like they have a lot more depth, or rather they sound a lot more forward. And that is something that we want to achieve with the vocals, because they're now going to be elements which are the focal point of the song. So if something's going to be the focal point, we need it for it to stand out. And this is the chain that I've used to get there. And you guys can apply this in your own way. So first step is to take out unnecessary information, take out low mids, some high mid resonance. Then applying some compression to overall generally bring down the peaks. Then a little bit of multiband to take out the high mid resonance in the vocal, which I actually feel we need to cut more. Yeah. Oops, too much.
कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई.
Okay, good question. Whoever asked it. What about a de-esser?
सतनाम भजन यहाँ बिरथा कोई ना माने कहीं बिन सतना.
There, we can hear the S sticking out on the Sat. So let's. Now, this is another compressor that we use, but this works very similar to the kind of compressor, the multiband. Here, what it's doing is it's only compressing the higher frequency information. So, can you guys see here that we have this 8 kilohertz band? Okay. Just a second. Did the camera stop? You guys are able to see the screen and stuff clearly? Alright, cool. I'll just move on. For some reason, my zoom is acting strange here. Is it the phone? Alright, anyway, I'll just continue because they can see my screen either. So we want to compress just the S's here. So what I'll do is I'll put this in sidechain mode where you can hear only the reverb, yeah? Oh, sorry, not the reverb. I meant only the S's. Just join on the same link using my phone, so they'll be able to see my screen through that. But disconnect from audio, otherwise they'll be able to hear it twice. Yeah, so I'm actually trying to find the spot of where the S is. Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's somewhere around this. There it is. So yeah. Just 1 second, guys. Disconnected from audio. My bad, I muted myself there. Yeah. There, you should be able to hear me now. Yeah. So I was trying to find the spot where the S's are sticking out. And for different people, for different singers, for different songs, that frequency will be different. So you can change the frequency using this knob and find that point where the S's are sticking out. So what I'll do is, now that I've found the point, I'm gonna.
Satnam.
So the threshold is at what point it starts compressing, and range is how much it's compressing. So if I really wanted to compress a lot of the S, then I would set the range to be really high. So let's check this out.
Satnam.
Okay, the threshold is now.
Satnam bhajan. Satnam.
Now it sounds like he has a lisp, right?
Satnam bhajan.
Obviously, we don't want to cut out all the S's. We want some of it to be there. So we need to dial in the right setting with our.
Satnam. Satnam. Satnam bhajan. Satnam bhajan.
So you'll be able to see this attenuation knob.
Satnam.
Okay, bit much.
Satnam bhajan. Satnam bhajan. Satnam.
Okay, yeah, I think that's enough of de-essing for this. And
Satnam bhajan.
so the thing is, the moment we try to make a vocal very crispy or bright sounding, the more important it is to control the S's. Yeah, because if you're going to boost that high frequency range, then we need to control the S's that are going to stick out in it. So you might have to end up doing more de-essing if you're working with a source that needs to be bright in nature. Yeah, that you want to make bright rather. Cool. So let's
Satnam bhajan.
a little bit more we can go.
Satnam bhajan. Yahan birtha ayu jay rahi.
Yes, we should pranav, which is why that is what I've done, right? Yeah, I have. Idly DS before putting that shelf. So that, see, what's happening is that the S is super dynamic in nature. And what we're doing with the shelf is we're bringing that entire high frequency range up. So by bringing that dynamic S down and then boosting it, we're making sure that the S doesn't stick out even more to a point where it is like really annoying to listen to. So controlling the dynamics of that frequency range is super important. So I have de-essed and then I have saturated it, or rather applied saturation. Cool. Now let's quickly check out effects on this. So I think what we'll try to do is try to do a couple of interesting effects on this and see. I feel like this also needs to be kind of spacey for some reason. I don't know, let's try it out and see along the way what we end up with. So I'm going to use two reverbs, one which is a plate reverb and one reverb that's maybe a bigger decay reverb. So, and I can use the blend of the two to find. So the plate reverb is going to give it that sense of space, and the decay is just going to give it more of an affected feel so that it feels bigger and grand. Yeah. So let's try to listen to it with the effects, and then we listen to it with context to the track and see how it sounds. Alright. Cool. So let's try the plate first. So what I'll do is I'll just make a new one. It's fine. Okay. And I'm just going to put a Alright. For those who want, you can just directly put it on the track also.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
Okay. One thing that I just noticed the moment I put on the reverb is, for some reason the body of the vocals has come back. So what's happening is that the reverb is also reacting to the different frequency ranges within that track. So let's just listen only to the reverb. Yeah, that's sounding super boxy. So what we'll do is, and something that's a good thing to do is usually just EQ your reverb. I don't want any of that. So I'm just EQing my reverb to take off that frequency range. That's actually making the whole sound more boxy. Let's check it now with and without EQ.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं बिन.
Yeah, this is before.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे
And
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
cool, so let's try to add some more effects to get that sense of space more out of this track, out of the vocals on the track. Is everybody able to follow what I'm doing so far? Please type in yes if you guys are able to follow. Super. Okay. Alright. Cool. Now we'll get into... that's a great one. You know what? Let's try using a slapback on this. Why not? Let's just try using a slap. Okay, slapback is like a delay that actually happened because of the way tapes function. But you'll listen to it and then you'll know what I'm talking about. It might sound cool on this. This is a delay that you'll probably hear on almost all like rock, indie records or whatever. But this is the plugin that I use usually to get that slapback effect. You put it in insert mode, send return mode, okay, and slapback is like a delay that's coming right after the source. So this is what.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
That's going to. I actually wanted to just show you guys the signal chain today, but I thought I'll just do it along with you so it's easier to understand. Where is this gone? What am I looking for? There it is, yeah. Can you hear those two vocals? That's the slapback sort of kicking. This is the slapback. So few milliseconds later from the main vocal is when this delayed vocal is coming. Doesn't sound great right now, but let's make it work for this track.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं.
Yeah, it's very subtle effect. That's actually giving the vocals more depth. So what I'm going to do now is I will change this delay time. I'll keep it slightly more on one channel and slightly less on one channel. So it'll sound like this.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं.
This is without the effects, okay? I'll just play them with and without the effects.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं, मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं मैं
Yeah, it sounds like it's widened because we've moved stuff left and right.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई ना माने कहीं 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 बिन सतनाम भजन यहाँ बिरथा.
In fact, what I want is, I don't want too much top end on the slapback, so I'll take off some of that so it's a more subtle.
मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं 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 बिन सतनाम भजन यहाँ बिरथा आयु जाय रही मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं मैं कैसे कहूँ कोई न माने कहीं.
What do you guys think of the overall way that the vocals feel like they're fitting with the track now? Yeah, feels like the effects are now actually blending with the track, that we've got more space happening, we've got more width on it. We've gone with the brighter approach, which doesn't necessarily work for this track, but it's one approach out of many that you can implement on this. So we've utilized the EQ to take out space, compression to tame the dynamics, the multiband to tame specific ranges within this track, and then added delay, slapback delay, plate reverb, and a big reverb to get this lush effect. Yeah, the way you've set up the effect tracks, are the dry tracks playing at full level? Yeah, or maybe that's how you can create. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm sending the dry signal into the dry signals going straight to the master bus, and the reverberated signals going separately. So the way that this is happening is that the dry signal is being sent to a bus which is on 100% that has only reverberated signal. Yeah, you can probably, I'll send you a couple of resources that you can look up on this that will explain how buses work and how to use them in different DAWs. I think that'll get too complex if I get into that today. Any doubts so far about what I've done here? The reason why I'm using Blue Cat is because, well, we had multiple versions of Valhalla installed, and for some reason our original isn't working anymore. There were some issues, so we have to use it as a VST. And in Pro Tools you can use VSTs through Blue Cat. Okay, so if you want to create multiple layers, there are two ways to do it. You can record multiple layers of vocals on top of each other and then pan them. That's usually what people do as DTs and stuff like that. And if you want, you can also use tools like Doubler, etc. to create that effect. Cool. Any other questions? Have you used sidechain compression on Reverb? No, not use sidechain on. Alright, cool. Okay. I hope this practical explanation was good for you guys to understand. And you guys got the gist of it in terms of how this works. Do you guys want to quickly do this on another track and explore this? I'll show you guys one important concept of how this works where you want to create space and when there's clash happening between multiple elements in a song. So right now when we heard this track, we could hear that there's clash happening between the vocals and the piano.
Now it's castles in the air, and you just cave in. It never ends. I know you've heard enough. I'll say it once again. I cannot save you from yourself.
Okay, so in this section we can clearly hear that there's clash happening between the vocals and the piano, right? So can you guys identify and tell me what range is that clash happening in?
I'll say it once.
Okay, first of all we can hear that mid-range is sticking out on the vocals. So let's try to go in with the multi-band and take out that frequency range.
I'll say.
Okay.
I'll say. I'll say. I'll say it once again. I'll say it once again. I cannot save you from yourself.
Okay, so what's happening here is that there is the vocals and the track are too close to each other, so we're not able to get that sense of depth. So what are the two ways to create depth here now? Let me see if you guys can get this right. Either we move the track behind or we move the vocals forward, correct? Everybody agrees with me on that? Yeah? And the way to move the track behind now is to identify which range of the track is conflicting with the vocals. And how do we do that? Let's just listen to this and try to understand.
I hope I ever reach you and you break through. I stood beside you, said all I ever can. Now it's castles in the air, and you just cave in. It never ends. I know you've heard enough. I'll say it once again.
Okay, so the way that I'm hearing it, I can tell that, the this range these two are the frequency ranges that are forward. So what I would essentially do is, right now since we're talking primarily about vocal mixing, I would identify the elements that are there in the song in these individual frequency ranges and then push them further behind. Yeah, and that would give me more sense of depth. Let's see if we've gotten to a better point with this.
I hope I ever.
I'm also just going to drop the level of the track just by half a degree.
I hope I ever reach you and you break through. I stood beside you, said all I ever can. Now it's castles in the air.
Yeah, can you guys feel that now there's much more depth? Vocals feel like you can pay more attention to it. And you know what? It's all about making these small tweaks, listening to it, understanding what needs to be affected, and just break it down into these three simple concepts of depth, width and height. And I think you should be able to get how to achieve a decent mix. I hope everybody was able to hear that difference though. Yeah, cool. All right, super. I think we've been at it for 3.5 hours. That's a lot of information I've thrown at you guys also. So why don't we do one thing? I'm going to share all the resources that we've discussed today. I'll share the PPT, the links to the free plugins that you guys can get, and if there's anything else you need from me, do let me know, and we can set up a, maybe if you guys have specific doubts, we can probably do a follow-up session few months down the line where I can clarify any specific doubts that you might have. And please keep sending your music and your stuff on the group. I'd be happy to check it out and give you guys inputs, or if you have some doubts with doing some specific things with your mixes, let me know. I'll be happy to help. Yes. Yes, Ishwar, the way I'm sending it is through something called, where's this guy gone? We have something called Pro Tools Audio Bridge. So it's like a virtual channel that you can use between Pro Tools. Alright? Okay. Alright guys, I hope this was useful. I actually wanted to do more practical examples, but I think we're running short of time and I think everybody's also kind of tired. So, see you all. Stay in touch, and I hope this helped. Alright, take care. Bye-bye. No worries, you're welcome. And also a bunch of familiar faces who I haven't spoken to in a while. Stay connected. I'll talk to you guys. Alright.